This morning, Donald Trump said 7 words that may end up shaping not just this war, but the global economy. On a live phone call with NBC's Kristen Welker, he said Iran wants a deal, but the terms are not good enough yet. That one sentence immediately sent a message to oil traders, foreign governments, and financial markets around the world. Because if Iran is signaling that it wants an end to this conflict, and the White House is refusing to move, then this war is no longer just a military story. It becomes an economic story, a market story, and a story that could hit every household through fuel, food, and savings. And while Trump was saying those words, the war was still escalating in real time. U.S. and Israeli warplanes were already striking Isfahan. Iranian missiles were already in the air. American families were learning the names of 6 airmen killed in a refueling plane crash in Iraq. Oil was still sitting above $110 a barrel, far above where it was before the war began. So the real question is not whether this sounds tough on television. The real question is what happens next if no diplomatic process actually exists. The conflict began on the 28th of February 2026 with Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated American and Israeli campaign targeting Iran's nuclear facilities, missile systems, and military leadership. Since then, the war has moved fast and hit hard. Iran declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. The U.S. destroyed multiple Iranian mining vessels. American casualties rose. Iranian casualties climbed into the thousands, including civilians. Isfahan has been hit repeatedly. Gulf shipping routes have come under threat. And oil, which was trading near $87 before the war, surged as high as $120 before settling around $110. In barely over 2 weeks, the world's most critical energy corridor became the center of a war with global economic consequences. Now here is where the story turns. Trump told NBC that Iran wants to make a deal and that he does not want to make it yet because the terms are not good enough. He also said U.S. forces had totally obliterated Iran militarily and admitted his administration was looking at ways to reduce oil prices. That last part matters. It shows the White House understands the economic pain is real, but Reuters reported something much more revealing the day before. According to a senior White House official, Trump had actually rebuffed efforts even to start ceasefire talks and was focused on pressing ahead with the war. That is not the same as rejecting a weak offer. That means the diplomatic door may not even be open. Bloomberg added to that picture, reporting that no formal counteroffer had been made, no clear channel had been opened, and no timeline for talks existed. So now there is a serious gap between the public message and the sourced reporting. Publicly, Trump sounds like a president weighing whether to accept terms from a weaker opponent. Privately, according to reporting, there may not be any real negotiation happening at all. And that distinction matters because markets do not just react to bombs. They react to whether there is an exit. The deeper you go into the reporting, the clearer it becomes that the idea of a deal may be more political than real. Trump says Iran wants one. Iran says it does not. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi said Tehran had not asked for a ceasefire and saw no reason for talks with the United States. Other reporting said Iran's condition for any ceasefire would be a guarantee that neither the U.S. nor Israel could strike Iran again in the future. That is not a condition any American president could publicly accept. So what you have right now is not a real diplomatic process. You have public statements, impossible conditions, and conflicting narratives. This matters because oil prices depend heavily on expectations. If traders believe diplomacy is around the corner, prices may fall briefly. If they conclude there is no real path to de-escalation, high prices become the base case. That is exactly what happened today. When Trump first hinted that a deal existed in some form, oil dipped slightly. But once analysts read the full statement, and once CNN reported that Israel was planning at least 3 more weeks of strikes with thousands of targets still remaining, that dip disappeared. Oil recovered and held above $110. The market, in other words, did not believe peace was close. And while Washington was signaling uncertainty, the battlefield was signaling continuation. Israeli officials made clear that the campaign is far from over. Strikes hit Isfahan again. Iranian media reported civilian deaths, including factory workers. Iran escalated by threatening UAE ports and warning civilians near major shipping points. Some operations in Fujairah, one of the region's most important commercial hubs, were reportedly suspended. That is not just about military movement. That is about the arteries of global trade beginning to tighten under wartime pressure. Then the Pope stepped in with one of the strongest appeals yet, directly calling for an immediate ceasefire and describing the violence as atrocious. That kind of language matters because it shows how serious the international pressure for de-escalation has become. Yet even with that pressure building, the military campaign continued, and the White House gave no sign that it was ready to launch a serious diplomatic track. To be fair, the administration does have an argument. Their position is that negotiating too early could lock in a weak outcome and allow Iran to recover its military or nuclear capabilities later. If you stop before the strategic objective is achieved, you may simply be postponing the next crisis. That logic is not irrational. It is a recognizable wartime position. Supporters of the administration argue that each additional day of strikes weakens Iran further and improves any eventual deal. But there is a major weakness in that argument. According to Reuters, the problem is not just that Trump rejected bad terms. It is that he rejected the start of talks altogether. And if that is true, then the U.S. is not testing what is possible diplomatically. It is choosing war first and diplomacy later, with all the economic consequences that come with that choice. Those consequences are already showing up, and this is where the story becomes personal. Gas prices have not fully caught up to the rise in crude yet, but they will. Oil moved from $87 to above $110 in just over 2 weeks. That full increase usually takes time to filter through to the pump. Analysts have warned that if crude stays elevated for the next month, average U.S. gas prices could push toward $4.50 or even $5 a gallon. Now look at today's timeline again. Trump says no deal yet. Israel says 3 more weeks. That alone points toward a prolonged period of elevated energy prices. But it does not stop with gas. Fertilizer supply is also under pressure because the Gulf region plays a major role in global production and shipment. If fertilizer flows are disrupted during planting season, farmers plant less. If they plant less, harvests shrink. And if harvests shrink, food prices rise later in the year. That means this war could move from the oil market into the grocery aisle with a delay, but not a long one. Several reports already warn that a sustained Hormuz disruption could push food prices significantly higher within months. Then there is the stock market and retirement savings. The S&P 500 has already fallen since the war began. Energy stocks have gained, but most broad portfolios have taken damage. Airlines, manufacturing, and other sectors sensitive to fuel and shipping costs have been hit especially hard. Goldman Sachs raised recession odds. Other analysts have warned about the possibility of deeper market losses if the conflict drags on. Emergency oil reserve releases may help for a few days, but they do not resolve the underlying issue. They are a temporary cushion, not a real fix. The messaging from all sides is making the problem worse. Trump says Iran has been militarily obliterated, yet also asks other countries to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran is truly crushed, why is the strait still effectively closed? If the strait is still closed, then how complete is the military success really? Iran, on the other hand, denies seeking a deal while also issuing threats that push the region closer to wider disruption. Israel says the campaign has weeks left. The Pope says, stop now. The White House stays vague. The result is a fog of contradiction, and markets respond badly to fog. There are still major unanswered questions. What exactly are Trump's acceptable terms? He never said. Why does he insist Iran wants a deal if Iran publicly denies it? That could mean back channels exist, but are being denied for political reasons. Or it could mean Trump is presenting the illusion of a possible deal to calm economic anxiety. What does Israel's 3-week timeline really mean? A continued air campaign or a broader next phase? And above all, what happens if Hormuz remains effectively closed through that entire period? Every serious economic model says the risks rise sharply. So now all eyes turn to the next few days. Markets opening after Trump's statement will give the first real financial verdict. The Federal Reserve's next messaging window matters because energy-driven inflation may now begin colliding with recession fears. Iran's expected formal response will matter because the tone could show whether its public line is hardening or softening. And the 3-week military window announced by Israel becomes the key countdown. If that window ends without diplomacy, the economic picture gets recalculated all over again. So here is the full picture as it stands right now. Trump says Iran wants a deal, but the terms are not good enough. Iran says it has not asked for one. Reuters says Trump rejected even starting talks. Bloomberg says there is no confirmed negotiation channel. Israel says there are at least 3 more weeks of strikes ahead, and thousands of targets still remain. Iran continues to threaten shipping and Gulf infrastructure. The Strait of Hormuz remains deeply disrupted. Oil is still above $110. Recession risk is rising. And the war that some leaders are describing as nearly complete is still expanding in the places that matter most to the global economy. That is the real point. This is not just about the next strike or the next headline. It is about the gap between the public story and the documented reality. Publicly, the message is that Iran is weakened, diplomacy is possible, and the U.S. percent is simply holding out for better terms. In the sourced reporting, there is no active diplomacy, the military campaign is continuing, and the economic pressure is intensifying. And inside that gap sit the consequences that ordinary people will feel first. Higher gas prices, higher grocery bills, weaker retirement accounts, and a growing risk that this war drags the wider economy into something much more dangerous. The next real signal will not come from another press conference. It will come from the markets. When traders fully price in the rejected diplomacy, the extended Israeli campaign, the UAE port threats, and the continued Hormuz disruption, that number will tell us more than any carefully worded statement from Washington. Markets strip away political language and respond to risk as it actually exists. And right now, the risk is clear. The war is not close to over. The economic pain is not finished rising. And the longer diplomacy remains something discussed publicly but avoided privately, the more expensive this conflict becomes for everyone far from the battlefield. So this is where we are. A war entering a dangerous new phase, a White House projecting control while leaving key questions unanswered, an oil market refusing to believe that peace is near, and a global economy beginning to bend under the pressure. The most important thing to watch now is whether actions finally catch up with the language. Because if they do not, then what started as a regional military campaign may become a full economic shock with consequences that hit every home. And that is why this story matters far more than the military footage alone. If you want more scripts in this exact style, with tighter pacing, stronger hooks, and cleaner high-retention YouTube flow, send the next transcript and I'll rewrite it the same way.